The best welcome that we can offer P.J. O'Rourke is an introduction by Tom Wolfe himself. So I'll turn it over to Tom now. Thank you.
Well, thanks so very much, Rob, and I want to thank everyone who has gathered here today. And especially I want to thank, I know there are a couple of members of my class at Washington and Lee in 1951. And when I think of what they've done for me by establishing this series, it's hard for me to express my emotion, except to say that it makes me feel posthumous. But quite aside, I do thank one and all. But I have the very happy duty today of introducing one of the American writers that I admire to the very utmost, P.J. O'Rourke. And P.J., I don't think I told you what you did for me recently. I was asked by my dentist to address an annual convention in New York of the dentistry community, I guess. I had no idea that the vast numbers was in the Javits Convention Center, this huge place in New York. And feeling that my preparation had not been adequate, I turned to the works of P.J. O'Rourke, who had begun an essay that I'll never forget, which it began, "For those of you who long for the good old days, I have but two words: modern dentistry." Now, so PJ, I started that way, and I swear I did give you full credit, but I just got up and I said, "For those of you who long for the good old days, I have only two words: modern dentistry." The audience rose, and there was an applause. It went 10 minutes. And I kept trying to say, "That's a quotation from P.J. O'Rourke," but I didn't. But superior numbers made me feel that in some way it must have been Mike. Next time I'll make that clear ahead of time. But you know, this is a facility that P.J. O'Rourke has that very few writers do. Very few writers, it seems to me, really have their own voice. You know, in music you can spot it. You can't really describe to anybody why somebody like Stevie Wonder is so exceptional. There is a voice that you just don't hear anywhere else. And whenever I see that in a written form, I can't resist it. I have in my pocket here a newspaper clipping from the New York Post. You can see how old it is, turned yellow. The New York Post is known for its outrageous puns in the headlines. In fact, today is a good example. There's been a controversy, maybe it's well known, between the owners of what was to have been the Freedom Tower at the World Trade Center. The two missing buildings were to be replaced by this almost sacred spire that was to be called the Freedom Tower. Well, the owners began to think about that address, and they decided, you know, the original address, 1 World Trade Center, might be better. For one thing, tenants will not be here holding on to their arms of their chairs waiting for something to descend from the sky. World Trade Center just had a better ring to it. Well, this is, as you can imagine, kicked off a great controversy of patriotism versus commerce. And we know where that ends these days. So the New York Post had a big headline today saying, "Freedom Tower, F-R-E-E-D-U-M-B, Tower." Now that's what they're well known. That's what they're well known for. But my favorite of all times from the Post, I have right here. I'll first read you what the story was about. And this is only a one-column headline. Hubert Napier claimed he was 5 different people, not to mention a god and a dog, when he stabbed a woman to death on Roosevelt Island. But the jury brought in just one verdict yesterday: guilty. The headline is, "He are guilty." Now, that's the kind of thing I love, and I see it over and over again in the work of P.J. O'Rourke. Actually, I could read to you all day from P.J. O'Rourke, but he reads it better. He has a way of approaching things that are written about often, but in a way that makes you see them and also makes you see how inherently crazy the world tends to be. Another thing I think is very important is that P.J. O'Rourke is a reporter. P.J. has been all over the world, every hot spot that we have read about, certainly in the last 20, 25 years. He has been to see in person, and he's always had an individual take on things. In fact, P.J. was one of the original editors and founders of the National Lampoon, and he is such a maverick that they finally couldn't stand his sense of humor. He was not really a left-wing bohemian. There was something wrong. There was something wrong with this guy, but he's done whatever he's wanted ever since then, and he really, well, we won't get into those days, but he really put that magazine on the map. Here is P.J. O'Rourke in Iraq, and he's writing about, he says, well, this is 2003, April 2003. He says, after 8 days of, well, I'll start at the top. Why is Iraq so easy to harm and so hard to help? After 8 days of war, U.S. troops had arrived in Karbala, 60 miles from Baghdad. Misery had arrived everywhere, but humanitarian relief had gotten only as far as Salwan and Qazar, just across the border from Kuwait. He said, I could see one reason that relief had gone no farther. It was outside of Safwan, March 28th, on the roof of a Kuwait Red Crescent tractor trailer full of food donations. Below, a couple of hundred shoving, shouldering, kneeing, kicking Iraqi men and boys were grabbing at boxes of food. Red Crescent volunteers provided the boxes gingerly to the mob. Each white carton would be grasped by 3 or 4 belligerents and pulled in 3 or 4 or 5 directions, tug of Congolese Civil War style. Every person in the mob seemed to be arguing with every other person, giving in to conflicting impulses to push themselves forward and pull others away. Shouting Iraqis were propelled in circles. A short, plump, bald man sank in the royal. A small boy, red-faced and crying, was crushed between 2 bellowing fat men. An old man was trampled trying to join the fray. The Iraqis were snatching food as if they were starving, but they couldn't have been starving or they wouldn't have been able to snatch so well. Most looked fully fed. Some were too fit and active. Everyone behind the trailer was expending a lot of calories at noontime in the 90-degree heat. Looking out, I saw irrigated patches in the desert, about the same density as the patches on a uniform of a mildly diligent Boy Scout. The tomatoes were ripe. Nannies, billies, and kids browsed between garden plots. Goat bolognese was on offer, at least for some locals. There was absolutely no reason for people to clobber one another. Even assuming that each man in the riot and each boy was the head of a family, and assuming the family was huge, there was enough food in the truck. Mohammed al-Kandari, a doctor from the Kuwait Red Crescent Society, had explained this to Iraqis when the trailer arrived. Al-Kandari was a forceful explainer, He resembled a beneficent version of Pluto in the Popeye comics, or Bluto in Animal House. Al-Kandari had persuaded the Iraqis to form ranks. They looked patient and grateful, the way we privately imagine recipients of food donations look when we're writing checks to charities. Then the trailer was opened, and everything went to hell again. Now, that is the kind of that touch of actually seeing what goes on, not a food fight, but just a food grab and a riot in a situation like that. That, to me, is journalism. It's one thing, and I think she's a wonderful person, a wonderful writer, but it's one thing to be Maureen Dowd and read the New York Times every day and then say something funny about it. I think it's somehow a lot richer to go out and take a look. But now you've heard enough from me. I've just given you a taste of the great man, and I'm going to immediately turn this over to P.J. O'Rourke.
Thank you. Much better introduction than I deserve, but I'll take it anyway. We face a terrible economic crisis in America today, and let's ignore it. Let's not do a damn thing about it. The cure is worse than the disease. Who seeks to trade freedom for security loses both. And this is just as true of economic freedom as it is of freedom from going to the gulag. Now, you've got the cow of economic freedom. Now, are you going to take her to the market and trade her for the magic beans of the federal stimulus package? Now, when you climb that beanstalk, you're going to find a giant government at the top. You think you're going to be as lucky as Jack and the Beanstalk was? I mean, I'm not even sure Jack was as lucky with his giant killing. I mean, all we've got to go on is the story that Jack told. Jack the Giant Killer, that's Jack's version, you know? My guess is that Jack spent years getting investigated by giant subcommittees, and that Jack is now paying the giant a 95% tax on Jack's corporate bonuses, you know? I mean, see, I'm kind of an economics fan. I mean, like some people are sports fans. I root for the free market team. Adam Smith is my star player. I've got all the memorabilia. I've got the Wealth of Nations, the Theory of Moral Sentiments, the Division of Labor bobblehead doll. You know, it's my hobby. I wrote a book about it. And because I wrote a book about it, people will ask me, what would Adam Smith say about this financial meltdown? Well, the free market is the greatest reserve of our freedoms. Economic freedom is the freedom that we exercise most often and to the greatest extent. Now, see, freedom of speech is important if you've got something to say. I checked on the internet. Nobody does. Freedom of belief is important if you believe in anything. I've watched cable TV. I can't believe it. Freedom of assembly is important if you have an assembly to go to, the way we do here today. But most people go to the mall. And at the mall, they exercise economic freedom. But the free market is dead. The free market was killed by the Bolshevik Revolution, by fascist central planning, by Keynesianism, Great Depression, World War II economic controls, British Labour Party victory of 1945, Keynesianism again, the Arab oil embargo, Bill Clinton's third-way economic policies, and by the current fiscal crisis. That is 10 times the free market has died in the past 100 years, and every time the free market dies, everybody wants to know, what would Adam Smith say? It's a, hi, God, how's my atheism? How's it going? How's my atheism going, God? Sort of moment. What would Adam Smith say? He would be laughing too hard to say anything. See, Smith spotted the cause of our financial disaster, not just before it happened, but 232 years before it happened. Let me read a little passage from the Wealth of Nations, published with happy coincidence for America in 1776. Smith said, "A dwelling house as such contributes nothing to the revenue of its inhabitant. And Smith went on to point out that even if the house is rented, quote, as the house itself can produce nothing, the tenant must always pay the rent out of some other revenue. So Smith concluded that the revenue of the whole body of the people can never, in the smallest degree, be increased by a bunch of ugly condos and tacky housing developments. And that's subprime mortgage meltdown right there in a nutshell. Smith knew about speculative bubbles. The South Sea bubble and the Mississippi scheme, which was the French version of the same idea, they had blown up just a couple years before Smith was born. They were very much part of the culture that he grew up in. And while Smith was in Scotland writing The Wealth of Nations, there was a run on Scottish banks. Only 3 of Edinburgh's 30 private banks survived. And the reaction of Scottish speculators sounds very, very familiar. According to Smith, the banks, the speculators seem to have thought, were in honor bound to supply the deficiency and to provide them with all the capital which they wanted. The bailout. Smith knew that speculative bubbles are not caused by the free market. Speculative bubbles are the result of a breakdown in something. Sometimes a breakdown in common sense, sometimes a breakdown in the rule of law, but they're not the result of a breakdown in economic liberty. This free market tells us how much people are willing to pay for a given thing at a given moment. That's all the free market does. The free market, it's a measurement. The free market is a bathroom scale. We may not like what we see when we step on that bathroom scale. Geez, 230 pounds. But we cannot pass a law making ourselves weigh 185, and Barack Obama thinks we can. So how would Adam Smith fix our financial crisis? I'm sorry, but it is fixed already. The answer to a decline in the value of speculative assets is to pay less for them. Job done. Now, we could pump the banks full of our national treasure, but Smith said to attempt to increase the wealth of any country, either by introducing or by detaining in it an unnecessary quantity of gold and silver, is as absurd as it would be to attempt to increase the good cheer of private families by obliging them to keep an unnecessary number of kitchen utensils. We could send in the experts to manage our bailout, but Smith said, I have never known much good done by those who affect to trade for the public good. And we could nationalize our economy. But Smith said, the state cannot be very great, of which the sovereign has the leisure to carry on the trade of wine merchant or apothecary, let alone chairman of General Motors. So, is it too soon to talk about the failed Obama presidency? First thing Obama does is a $700 billion plus economic stimulus. Now, wasn't that the last thing George W. Bush did? Didn't we just spend $700 billion? Now we're spending $700 billion again? Or am I getting old? A little problem with my hearing. Echo in the miracle era. Huh? I mean, $700 billion Bush financial bailout plus $787 billion Obama stimulus package plus $3.6 trillion federal budget. You add all that together and it equals more money than there is. There ain't that much money. Obama administration is taking more money than America or anybody else has got. Okay, $1.487 trillion that we are spending on the combined financial bailout and economic stimulus package. That's equal to more than the total U.S. individual and corporate income tax payments per year combined. Which raises the question, instead of a bailout and a stimulus, why not no taxes for a year? Zero. Zip. None. Just stop taxing us. Now, would this be an economic stimulus? Yeah, a stimulus. I mean, comparing no taxes to what the Obama administration is doing, this is like comparing Viagra to Tylenol PM. Would this be a financial bailout? Well, I guess so. Bailout, I mean, just let that old Wall Street rowboat sink, because we're buying a brand new yacht. But no taxes. It will never fly. And why not? Because no taxes, that only puts money in the pocket of people who pay taxes. And they didn't vote for Obama. Although, as you may have noticed now that he's been elected, everybody voted for Obama. And actually that makes sense, because you know how many people pay income tax, statistically speaking? None. Let me give you a little math on this. Annual federal budget expenditure is about $3 trillion a year, $3.6 trillion this year. About 300 million Americans. Federal expenditure, something like $10,000 per person per year. So a family of four is getting $40,000 a year spent on it by the federal government, which means that this family would have to be paying $40,000 a year in income tax just to break even. Now, after all the deductions and a little bit of cheating and a visit to HR Block, this means we're talking about a family income of well over $160,000 a year. That family is among America's wealthiest families. It's in the top 5%. Now, if you then apply a plus or minus 5% margin of error to my figures, you'll see that statistically speaking, nobody pays taxes. Simple as that. We're all on the teat. We're a nation of sponges. The country's full of bloodsuckers. And Obama's remedy for the recession, it's like medical treatment back in George Washington's time. It's apply more leeches. I mean, Obama's got a great economic plan. If it's working, tax it. If it isn't working, bail it out. And if it's just scraping by, drop Barney Frank on it till it screams for help. Then Obama appoints a Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who thinks foreign affairs means her husband is overseas. Then comes Congress sending Obama that $3.6 trillion budget chock full of pork products. I mean, all the earmarks and set-asides that Obama promised that he wouldn't tolerate. And what does Obama do? He clucks his tongue. He wags his finger. Naughty, naughty Congress. Now, I'll sign this budget, he says, but I don't ever, ever want to see another budget like this again. The president is a wimp. Now, I know what I am talking about because I have got a house full of spoiled kids because I'm a wimp. I'm strict with the kids like Obama is strict with the Congress. I'm always going around saying, if you ever use your mother's Hummel figurine collection for BB gun target practice again, and deliberately pour spaghetti sauce all over the new White Couch, and lock your sister in the garden shed with your pet snake, you do that again, mister, and Daddy will be very disappointed in you. Speaking about kids, I have to wonder about Obama's whole change theme. I mean, if you are like me and you just finally got the last one out of diapers, change is not a good word. In fact, most of the time, change is not a good word. Change attire. You'd better change your ways. Change of life. Spare change man, any change in a wart or mole. I mean, then there's hope. You remember your Greek mythology. The box that hope comes in is Pandora's box. And after Pandora opens that box and death and disease and all the ills that plague mankind have been set loose upon the world, nothing is left in the bottom of that box but hope. Is that a good thing when you've got nothing left but hope? How about when there's nothing left but hope in your bank account? Failed Obama presidency. See, bringing politicians in to run Wall Street, that's like saying, Dad burned dinner, let's get the dog to cook. I mean, I love Obama's plan to split the assets of troubled financial institutions into good banks and bad banks. And good assets go to a good bank, bad assets go to a bad bank. I am so there with opening a checking account at a bad bank, because I mean, new customers at bad banks, they won't get good things like toasters. We'll get bad things like liquor and guns, And the personalized checks, in bad bank checkbooks, they won't have pretty pictures on them. They'll have printed message. This is a stick-up. I mean, it's going to be great. So politics is going to take over the car industry. I can predict the result, a lightweight, compact vehicle with a small carbon footprint, using sustainable alternative energy. When I was a kid, we called it a Schwinn. I mean, next, politics will take over health care. Voting will cure you. Voting will cure you. It's magic, You'll go to your doctor and he'll say, don't worry. He'll say, don't worry, everything will be fine. I'll cure your cancer by stepping into this small curtain booth and putting an X next to Barack Obama's name, I mean, America has wound up with a charming liberal as a president, and this frightens me. This frightens me not because I hate liberals. I don't. I have many charming liberal friends. They're lovely people, as long as they keep their nose out of things they don't understand, such as working for a living. When charming liberals stick their nose into working for a living, they become ratchet-jawed purveyors of monkey doodle and baked wind. They are piddlers upon merit, beggars at the doors of accomplishment, thieves of livelihood, envy-coddling tax lice, applauding themselves for giving away other people's money. They are the lapdogs of the poli-sci class, returning to the vomit of collectivism. They are pig herders tending that sow who eats her young, the welfare state. They are muck-dwelling bottom feeders growing fat on the worries and disappointments of the electorate. They are the ditch carp of democracy. And that's what one of their friends says. No. Also, a charming liberal president frightens me because what if Obama really does turn out to be a uniter, not a divider? I mean, this could mean an end to partisan bickering and result in politicians of all stripes working together to solve America's problems, and then we're really screwed. See, Democrats and Republicans working together, end of last year, that cost us $700 billion for the Wall Street financial bailout, and that was when they were hating each other. Imagine what it would cost if they started getting along, you know? America needed a Republican Senate, at the very least, because the Republican Senate would have meant gridlock. I love gridlock. Two most frightening words in politics are bipartisan consensus. Bipartisan consensus, that's like when my doctor and my lawyer agree with my wife that I need help. Democratic president, Democratic Congress, this is Dr. Seuss government, you know, thing one and thing two, and there isn't even a cat in a hat around to control them, you know. I mean, I guess the only controlling thing's the Supreme Court, and Obama's going to appoint the cat in a hat to the Supreme Court as soon as he gets a chance. I mean, at moments like this, it becomes vitally important to ask the question, what are these Democrats going to do? And remember, it's not just a financial crisis that we face here. I mean, there's also Iraq, there's a war in Afghanistan, and so forth. Now, so far, Barack Obama has been all he has been able to do by way of an Iraq policy is to make what I think of as the high school sex promise. I'll pull out in time, honest honey. Okay, Obama has committed more troops to Afghanistan, but committed them for what? He told me the plan this morning, and I still don't get it. I guess for whatever the NATO allies want. Great, you know, Obama's going to decide what to do in Afghanistan by waiting to see what France does, you know. Although waiting to see what France does, it might not be such a bad idea because France is a treasure to mankind. French ideas, French beliefs, French actions, they form a sort of lodestone for humanity because a moral compass needle needs a butt end. And whatever direction France is pointing towards Nazi collaboration, communism, existentialism, Jerry Lewis movies, or running away in Afghanistan, we can go the other way with a clear conscience, you know? What else are the Democrats going to do? They're going to produce more ethanol, although up in the back hills of Kentucky, they've been making high-octane stuff out of corn mash for years, and I can't see that it's done their economy much good. And you know what sticklers the Democrats are for ethics reform, never mind Secretary of the Treasury Timothy H&R Block Geithner, nor non-Secretary of Commerce Bill Richardson, or non-Secretary of Health and Welfare Tom Daschle, and so on and so forth. Anyway, a congressman will no longer be able to get a meal from a lobbyist unless the congressman brings a note from his doctor showing that he is bulimic and the meal will be returned. And the Democrats are going to reform the health care system. But memo to the Democrats, Hillary already reformed the health care system 16 years ago. Just the outline of Hillary's 1993 health care plan was 1,400 pages long. You could stand on it to paint the ceiling. The entire U.S. Constitution can be printed on 5 pages with all the amendments. That's 5 pages to run a whole country for 232 years versus 3 reams of government pig Latin if you slam your thumb in the car door, you know? A lot of people say that Hillary's health care plan almost destroyed Clinton's first term. It certainly diminished Hillary's influence in the White House. You will recall that Bill had to seek help from a different woman to almost destroy his second term. You know, to my mind, there's only one group of people who got what was coming to them in last fall's elections. There was just one bunch who really deserved to have the Democrats win, and that was the Republicans. Crummy war, scary economy, public opinion of Congress and the White House down around Mrs. Elliott Spitzer's opinion of her husband, you know, and Republicans, they just forgot. They forgot that there was such a thing as an angry voter. And hell, I'm one and I am a Republican, you know? I mean, don't even get me started on my frustration with the Bush administration. I mean, no child left behind. What if they deserve to be left behind? What if they deserve a smack on the behind, you know? National testing program to test whether kids are what? Stupid? You've got kids. Kids are stupid, you know? I mean, constitutional ban on gay marriage. I didn't get it. How about a constitutional ban on first marriages? Now you're talking. No? Homeland Security sounded like a failed online mortgage broker, you know? I mean, Bush's immigration program, fence the border and give a huge boost to the Mexican ladder industry, you know? I mean, put the National Guard on the Rio Grande and know that U.S. troops are standing between you and yard care, you know? I mean, Bush said that if illegal immigrants, if they wanted citizenship, they'd have to do three things. They'd have to pay taxes, learn English, and work in a meaningful job. Well, Bush didn't meet 2 out of 3 of those qualifications. I mean, but what bothered me most about the Bush administration was that the Republicans are supposed to be the party that understands the free market, and the Bush administration didn't know what to do about this financial crisis any better than anybody else did. You know, they're thinking, oh, well, I don't know, let's take $700 billion of taxpayer money and hand it to Secretary of the Treasury Henry Paulson, who used to run Goldman Sachs, to give to Goldman Sachs. You know? Will that work? They don't know. They wouldn't have no idea. You know, I mean, we're addicted to credit. We just woke up with an awful hangover. We're shaking with the DTs. The liquor cabinet is empty. There's no beer in the fridge, but there's a bottle of something under the kitchen sink. Can't quite read the label, but what the hell, you know? So, now, it's not that I blame the Republicans too much for being confused. I mean, Joe Jerk, down the road from me, with all the cars up on blocks in his front yard, he falls behind in his mortgage payments, and the economy of Iceland explodes. I'm missing a few pieces in this puzzle myself, you know? I mean, a lot of lousy mortgages that would probably never get repaid. They're handed out to Joe Jerk and his drinking buddies and all the ex-wives and single mothers that Joe and his pals have littered the nation with. And Wall Street's looking at all this worthless paper, and Wall Street's thinking, how can we make a buck off this? Well, the answer was to wrap it in a pretty bow. Now, if you took a wide enough variety of lousy mortgages, some from the east, some from the west, some from cities, some from suburbs, some from blue-collar shacks, some from white-collar McMansions, you bundle them all together and you put pressure on the bond rating agencies, on Moody's and S&P, to do some fancy risk management math. You came up with a collateralized debt obligation with a AAA rating, good as cash until it wasn't. Or, to look at it another way, Wall Street was pulling the old room full of horseshit trick on us. Brokers were saying, I am going to sell you a room full of horseshit, and with that much horseshit, you just know there's a pony in there somewhere, right? Anyway, it's no use blaming Wall Street. I mean, that's like blaming whores for getting paid. You know, the people on Wall Street, they're in it for the money, you know? We pay them to be in it for the money. We don't want our retirement accounts to get a 2% return, although it looks pretty good at the moment, you know? I mean, the only thing that we really know about this financial crisis, for sure, is that it will end. It will end. The Democrats may be able to slow the recovery, but they will not be able to stop it. Credit investment freeze will end because investment defines humanity. Animals don't invest. If a dog has a surplus, he'll eat it all and vomit it up, you know, rather than give some of it to another dog in return for shares in the car chasing and the chewing up shoes, you know. Investment defines civilization. Barbarians don't raise money with debt and equity. They raise money by stealing, you know, although during the boom in subprime mortgage lending, it sometimes was hard to tell the difference between debt and stealing. But anyway, even so, investment is one of the most important inventions in human history. If it were not for investment, all the inventors, all the manufacturers, all the business people who have brought prosperity to the modern world, they would have to get money the way I do, by asking their wives. There's only one problem with my talking to you about investment, though. And the problem is that I was a liberal arts major. I don't know anything about investment. I mean, of course, lately it's looking like nobody knows anything about investment, but I really don't know anything. I mean, best investment I've made, I left a $20 bill in the jacket pocket of this suit last month. And I found it this morning, which puts me way ahead of my mutual fund, I gotta say. But I'm just too stupid. I'm too stupid to be talking to you about economics. However, in fairness to myself, I'm not just stupid. I am a student of stupidity. I am a political reporter. My job, stupidity is an asset. We live in democracy, rule by the majority, rule by the people. 50% of people are below average intelligence. Mathematical fact. Explains everything about politics. Now, not that we would want to live in a country ruled only by the best and the brightest. That would be too much like being married to Nancy Pelosi, you know? So we have to keep supporting democracy, even when democracy acts up the way it is done in Russia and the Gaza Strip and our presidential election. See, long term, there's only one thing that gives me hope as a Republican, and that is the Democrats. It is going to be hard doing a worse job running America than the Republicans did, but the Democrats can do it if anyone can. You know, I mean, as a senator, Barack Obama was opposed to the war in Iraq. But what did he want to do? Did he want to give Saddam Hussein a mulligan, let him take his tee shot over? You know, Democrats were yelling, we won the war, but we're losing the peace because Iraq is so unstable. And I'm thinking, well, when Iraq was stable, it attacked Israel in 1967 and 1973. It attacked Iran, it attacked Kuwait, it gassed the Kurds, it butchered the Shiites. Who wants a stable Iraq, you know? Well, we've got the Democrats. They're the party of government activism, the party that says government can make you richer, smarter, slimmer, taller, and take a dozen strokes off your golf game. And we've got the Republicans. They're the party that says government doesn't work, and then they get elected and prove it. Now, my job is to make fun of politics. But after 39 years of making fun of politics, I have realized that I am enjoying myself about as much as a grizzly bear getting a bikini wax. I mean, I hate politics. And I don't just hate bad politics. I hate all politics. I even hate democracy. Imagine if our clothes were selected by the majority of shoppers, which would be teenage girls. I would be standing up here with my midriff exposed, you know? I mean, imagine deciding what's for dinner by family secret ballot. I've got 3 kids and 3 dogs in my family. We would be having Fruit Loops and rotten meat, you know? I mean, politics stink. Think about how we use the word politics. Are office politics ever a good thing? When somebody plays politics to get a promotion, does he or she deserve it? When we call a coworker a real politician, is that a compliment? Politics stink. And to my mind, true conservatism is a room deodorizer. It tries to keep the bad smell of politics out of home, school, and office. But I don't blame the politicians. Because just think what the truth would sound like on the campaign stump. Even a little bitty bit of truth. Imagine the politician that stood up and said, no, I can't fix public education. The problem isn't funding or teachers' unions or lack of vouchers or absence of computer equipment in the classrooms. The problem is your damn kids. Business and politics always more corrupt than the business of business. Now, yes, there are some bad people in business. My broker. Free market economics can be tough, as you may have noticed, but the only alternative to the purgatory of free markets is the hell of politics. And personally, right now, I would rather be out looking for a loan to start a chain of O.J. Simpson sports memorabilia stores than be trusting politics to solve my problems. See, political corruption is a law of economics. When buying and selling are controlled by voting, the first things that get bought and sold are votes. Simple as that. Now, do our politicians understand this law? Well, they should. They're lawyers. And incidentally, letting lawyers write laws, that is like outsourcing your food and drug safety inspections to China. You know? I mean, let me give you an example of how politics leads to corruption. In agriculture, a business that has been up to its bib overalls in politics since the first Thanksgiving dinner kickback to the Indians for subsidizing Pilgrim maize production with fish head fertilizer grants. You know? Now, I am willing to bet that very few people in this room have read the Farm Nutrition and Bioenergy Act of 2008, which passed both houses of Congress with veto-proof majorities, bipartisan consensus. But that is the kind of thing that I do, I get paid to do. I'm a professional student of political stupidity. Farm Nutrition and Bioenergy Act of 2008 is a $285 billion subsidy for wealthy landowners and huge agribusinesses. Passed Congress with these bipartisan majorities because everybody is running for president and nobody wants to get creamed in the Iowa caucuses. Right? Meanwhile, what does a small family farm get out of this farm bill? Nothing, because a small family farm doesn't exist anymore. Farm today means 100,000 chickens in a space the size of a Motel 6 bathroom. You know? Now, if we cared anything about the nutrition in the title of that farm bill, we would, to judge by the mountainous, jiggling flab of Americans, we would stop growing all food immediately. And bioenergy, this is a fraud of Bernie Madoff proportions. I mean, taxpayer money composted to produce a fuel made of alcohol that is more expensive than oil, causes more pollution than oil, and tastes almost as bad as oil with vermouth and an olive. Now, like most Americans my age, my actual experience with agriculture is pretty much limited to raising marijuana plants under grow lights in my off-campus apartment 40 years ago. But I did once help artificially inseminate a cow. I had this half-baked friend, a complete city slicker, who out of the blue decides he's going to raise cattle. So he buys a farm in New Hampshire and he buys some cows, and I'm up visiting him when it is time for the cows to get in a family way. Now, this is not done like I might have thought, with a cow and a bull and a heart-shaped stall and some Celine Dion tapes, you know? Breeding cattle is like teenage pregnancy, but more so. I mean, not only isn't the bull around to help raise the calf, he's not even there to get the cow knocked up. I mean, what happens instead is there's this liquid nitrogen thermos bottle full of frozen bull semen, and let's not even think about how they get that. And then there's this device that looks like a giant hypodermic needle. So my friend got this real farmer, Pete, to come in and actually do the honors. So while I'm holding the cow's head, and my friend is holding the cow's middle, Pete takes this freezing cold syringe thing and he inserts it into a very personal and private place of the cows. And then what Pete does is he sticks his arm into an even more personal and private place of the cows, all the way up to the elbow. Now, Pete does this not to get on the internet with a pornographic website, but so that he can feel the tip of the inseminator tube through the cow's intestine wall and guide that tip into the cow's uterus. This is a pretty gruesome thing to watch, and I'm glad to say that since I was up at the cow's other end, I didn't watch it. But I will tell you one thing, I will never forget the look on that cow's face. It was the same look that I got on my face for the same reason when I read the Farm Nutrition and Bioenergy Act of 2008. But you know, it is not just Democrats or liberals or pinstripe Wall Street screw-ups or farmers who are tempted to ask the government to solve their problems, especially their economic problems. We all get confused about the role that politics should play in economics, and this is because the political system and the economic system, they send contradictory messages. Economics sends us the message, I had better not be poor, I'd better get rich, I'd better make more money than other people. While politics sends us the message, some people make more money than other people. Some people are rich and other people are poor. We had better close that income disparity gap. It is so unfair. Well, I'm here to speak in favor of unfairness. So I've got an 11-year-old at home, and she is always saying, that's not fair. And I say, honey, you're cute. That's not fair. Your family's pretty well off. That's not fair. You were born in America. That's not fair. You had better pray to God that things don't start getting fair for you. Hell with it. The hell with income disparity gap. What we need is more income, even if it means a bigger gap. Because wealth is not a pizza where if I have too many slices, you have to eat the Domino's box. Wealth is not a zero-sum game. In a free market with property rights and rule of law, there are no losers when somebody gets rich. Now, politics promises equality. Everybody the same size, same weight, same income, everybody with the same vacation. 300 million people headed for Disney World first 2 weeks of August. You know, wait time for Space Mountain is now 1,000 years. This political quest for equality is really about fear. We fear the power that others have over us, and wealth is power, and so we fear the rich. We're afraid Bill Gates is going to buy the weather, and we won't be able to get sunshine on weekends unless we have a Microsoft Vista operating system. You know? But how rational is this fear of the rich? I mean, let us test this. We can test this scientifically. Let's take a midnight stroll through a wealthy neighborhood and take a midnight stroll through a slum. Now, sure, you can get in trouble in Monte Carlo. You know, you can lose at roulette. But you are much more likely to get mugged in that slum. Not that I blame the mugger. He's just practicing a little of what I call freelance politics. He's just closing the income disparity gap, you know? If that mugger would only listen to the politicians, he'd put down the pistol and pick up the ballot box and steal from everybody instead of just from you, you know? See, using politics to create fairness, this is a sin. The Bible is very clear about this. Now, it's not that I agree with certain of my fellow Republicans about God being involved in politics. My attitude is observe politics in this country. Observe politics around the world. Observe politics down through history. Does it look like God is involved? No, that's the other fellow who is a political activist. But in one particular sense, I do get my politics from the Bible, specifically from the 10th commandment. You see, the first 9 commandments concern theological principles and social law. Thou shalt not make graven images, steal, kill, etc. Fair enough. But then there's the 10th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. So here are God's basic rules about how we should live, a brief list of sacred obligations and solemn moral precepts, and right at the end is don't envy your buddy's cow, especially the one I helped artificially inseminate. Now, why did that make the top 10? Why would God, with just 10 things to tell Moses, choose as one of them jealousy about livestock? And yet you think about how important this commandment is to a community, to a nation, to a democracy, to a political system. If you want a mule, if you want a pot roast, if you want a cleaning lady, don't whine about what the people across the street have. Go get your own. The 10th commandment sends a message to the president and to all American politicians, Republicans, Democrats alike. It is a message about their political promises for redistribution, for regulation, for entitlement programs, for tax and spend policies, for bailouts, for economic stimulus packages, and for every other kind of fairness. And the message is clear and concise: go to hell. That's it. Now, that's everything I know. But if you want to ask some questions, I'll make up some other stuff. Thank you.